The boss's wife humiliates the employee. However, what she didn't know was that the employee was the boss's mother. The grandiose dining room of Michael Thompson's mansion was a spectacle of opulence, adorned with crystal chandeliers that sparkled like stars against the rich mahogany walls. The long table, draped in a silk cloth, was laid with fine china and gleaming silverware, each place setting meticulously arranged. Guests mingled in elegant attire, their laughter echoing through the halls as they sipped on expensive wine, oblivious to the tension simmering just beneath the surface. Isabella Thompson, the mistress of the house, moved through the crowd with an air of superiority, her designer dress hugging her frame perfectly. With a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, she engaged in conversation, her laughter ringing hollow. "Michael, darling, do you think we should consider a vacation in the Hamptons next month?" she asked, glancing at her husband, who was engrossed in a conversation about business with a group of men. "Sure, Isabella," he replied, absent-mindedly, his eyes darting back to the guests. He had little interest in vacation plans when there were deals to be made and profits to consider. Isabella's gaze drifted towards Clara, the housekeeper, who was quietly serving hors d'oeuvres to the guests. Clara moved gracefully, her hands steady even as she felt Isabella's eyes drill into her. The disdain in Isabella's stare was palpable, and it stung Clara, a woman who had once known warmth and love. "Clara, dear, could you be a bit quicker?" Isabella snapped, her voice cutting through the laughter. "These guests have things to discuss that are far more important than your leisurely pace." Clara bit her lip, suppressing the hurt that threatened to spill over. "Yes, ma'am," she replied softly, her heart heavy as she continued her work, feeling the weight of Isabella's condescension. As the evening progressed, Isabella continued her parade of arrogance, showcasing not only her wealth, but her belief in superiority. "You know," she interjected during a lull in the conversation, "Michael and I are truly blessed. Not everyone can afford the lifestyle we lead. Some people just don't understand the value of hard work." She glanced toward Clara, a smirk playing on her lips as she reveled in the discomfort she was causing. The guests, caught between laughter and polite nods, shifted uncomfortably. Clara felt their eyes on her, and she quickly lowered her head, focusing on her tasks as the sting of humiliation washed over her. How had it come to this? The woman standing before them, flaunting her wealth, was not the person she had once admired. In the kitchen later that evening, Clara poured herself a glass of water, trying to calm her racing heart. She couldn't shake the feeling of sorrow that followed her like a shadow. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses faded as she strained to hear the conversation in the adjoining room. "I don't know how you put up with her," one of the guests remarked, a hint of pity in his voice. "She treats her staff like dirt." Isabella laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Oh, Clara knows her place. It's not my fault if she can't keep up. I'm simply helping her understand her role in this household." Clara's heart tightened at the sound of Isabella's voice, the arrogance dripping from her words. Memories flooded her mind, happier times filled with love and laughter when she had held Michael as a child, dreaming of a future where they would always be together. But life had taken a different path, and now she was trapped in this gilded cage, observing the woman who had ensnared her son's heart. Suddenly, the front door swung open, and Michael stepped inside, shaking off the chill of the evening air. His presence was a mix of strength and warmth, and Clara felt a rush of conflicting emotions. She watched him from the kitchen, her heart swelling with pride and pain. "Isabella, I'm home," he called, his voice filled with joy. Isabella rushed to him, her smile shifting into a facade that was all too practiced. "Welcome back, love. You must be exhausted," she cooed, wrapping her arms around him. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she observed the scene, her heart aching at the sight of her son, so blissfully unaware of the true nature of his wife. Michael's eyes sparkled with affection as he kissed Isabella's cheek, completely oblivious to the turmoil that thrummed beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life. Clara remained hidden, her heart heavy, knowing that the choices made in the past had led them to this moment. In that opulent mansion amidst the laughter and clinking glasses, the truth remained hidden, a truth waiting to unravel, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change everything. Days turned into a suffocating routine at the Thompson mansion, where Isabella's disdain for Clara had reached new heights. The sun blazed overhead as she lounged by the opulent pool, the sound of splashing water contrasting sharply with the harsh words she hurled at Clara. The housekeeper was bent over, scrubbing the tiles around the pool's edge, her back aching from the strain. "Clara!" Isabella called out sharply, her voice slicing through the tranquil afternoon. "You missed a spot. How hard can it be to keep this place clean? Or are you too busy daydreaming about your pathetic life?" Clara's heart sank as she looked up at Isabella, who lay sprawled on a sun lounger, sunglasses perched on her nose, a cold drink in hand. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson. I'll get right on it," she replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. She resumed her task, each scrub of the tile feeling heavier than the last. "And don't forget to pick up my dry cleaning later. It's not like you have anything else to do," Isabella added, flipping her hair over her shoulder as she turned her gaze back to the shimmering water. "Yes, of course," Clara muttered, her voice barely audible. As she worked, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the years pressing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just a job for her. It was a chance to be near her son, even if he didn't know who she truly was. Later that evening, Michael arrived home, his presence filling the grand foyer. Clara's heart raced at the sight of him, yet she quickly masked her emotions, retreating into the shadows. Michael walked past her, oblivious to the turmoil that raged within her. He caught sight of Isabella, who greeted him with a bright smile, her demeanor instantly shifting to one of charm and grace. "Darling, you're home!" Isabella exclaimed, wrapping her arms around him. "I was just telling Clara how she needs to step up her game around here. Honestly, I don't know what I would do without you." Michael chuckled, brushing off his wife's comments. "I'm sure she's doing her best, Izzy." He glanced at Clara, who stood silently, her heart aching at the casual dismissal of her worth. "Best? You mean her bare minimum?" Isabella scoffed, rolling her eyes. "I swear I could do a better job myself if I had the time." Clara swallowed hard, forcing back tears as she turned away. She retreated to the kitchen, the weight of their conversation hanging heavy in the air. The sting of Isabella's words echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the chasm between her and the family she had lost. Days turned into weeks, each moment under Isabella's thumb feeling more unbearable than the last. One stormy evening, when the rain lashed against the windows and the wind howled like a wounded animal, Clara found refuge in the attic. It was a dark, dusty space filled with forgotten memories. As she rummaged through old boxes, her fingers brushed against a stack of faded photographs. She pulled them out, her heart racing as she uncovered snapshots of happier times. There was Michael as a child, his innocent smile lighting up the frame, Clara standing proudly beside him, her arms wrapped around her son. "Oh, Michael," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "How did we get here?" The attic was a sanctuary from Isabella's cruelty, a place where Clara could remember the love she had for her son before everything fell apart. She carefully examined each photograph, recalling the laughter they once shared, the dreams they had together. "I won't give up on you," she promised softly to herself, clutching the photos to her chest. "I'll find a way to make you see the truth." As the storm raged outside, Clara's resolve deepened. She had watched from the sidelines long enough. It was time to confront the lies and reclaim her place in Michael's life. The thought of revealing her true identity sent a shiver down her spine, but she knew it was necessary. She had to break through the facade that Isabella had built around their lives, a facade that threatened to suffocate her son's spirit. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the lavish mansion, Isabella was bustling about, preparing for the charity gala that would showcase her wealth and influence. The grand ballroom was adorned with extravagant floral arrangements and shimmering chandeliers, and the air was thick with the scent of polished wood and expensive perfume. Clara, caught in the whirlwind of Isabella's demands, felt the weight of her obligation press down on her more than ever. Clara, get the silverware from the kitchen and make sure it's polished to perfection. We can't have our guests using tarnished forks, can we? Isabella snapped, her voice sharp and commanding as she adjusted her designer dress in the mirror. Yes, ma'am, Clara replied quietly, the corners of her mouth turning down as she hurried away. The truth was, she loathed the idea of being an accessory in Isabella's grand display of arrogance. With every passing day, Isabella's cruelty only masked the insecurities that she hid behind her wealth and status. In the kitchen, Clara meticulously polished the silverware, her hands moving automatically while her mind wandered to a time when she was not just a housekeeper but a mother. The thought of Michael, her son, made her heart ache. She wished he could see the true nature of the woman he had married. As she wiped the last fork, her resolve hardened. Tonight, she would keep her eyes open, ready to confront Isabella if necessary. As the gala commenced, the mansion buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Guests mingled, draped in the finest attire, their conversations a blend of superficial pleasantries and veiled judgments. Clara moved among them, serving drinks and hors d'oeuvres, her heart heavy as she overheard snippets of conversation. Isabella really knows how to throw a party, one guest remarked, her voice dripping with insincerity. But can you believe she has that woman working for her? It's almost embarrassing. She must enjoy the power of it, another chimed in, laughter bubbling from her lips. Clara's fists clenched involuntarily, the derogatory comments slicing through her like daggers. Just then, she overheard Isabella's voice rising above the chatter. Honestly, who do they think they are? Just because they can donate a few dollars doesn't mean they're worthy of my time. I have the real power here, Isabella declared, her tone laced with disdain. Clara's heart raced, her anger igniting. It was one thing to treat her poorly, but to belittle the very people they were supposed to help. She couldn't remain silent any longer. Steeling herself, she approached Isabella, her voice low but firm. Isabella, that's not how you should speak about the guests. They are here to support a good cause. Isabella turned, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of Clara's defiance. You dare to lecture me? You're just a housekeeper. Know your place, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. The room fell silent, all eyes on the two women. Clara felt the heat of humiliation wash over her as the laughter around them faded. I may be a housekeeper, but I'm also a person deserving of respect, Clara shot back, her voice trembling but resolute. Isabella's face twisted in anger, the facade of her charm cracking. You think you can confront me? You're in no position to do so. I'll have you fired if you don't watch your tongue. Clara's heart sank, but she stood her ground. If you want to fire me, then do it. But know that I won't stand by while you belittle those who are less fortunate. Michael, overhearing the commotion, turned to see the confrontation unfolding. His brow furrowed with concern as he approached the scene. What's going on here? He asked, his voice steady yet laced with confusion. Isabella quickly regained her composure, flashing a charming smile as she turned to Michael. Oh, just a little misunderstanding, dear. Clara was merely expressing her opinions, and as you know, she tends to be a bit emotional. Clara's heart sank deeper as she watched the way Michael's eyes softened at Isabella's words. Clara, is that true? He asked, his tone shifting to one of paternal concern. You should be careful about how you speak to Isabella. Clara felt the sting of betrayal, the flicker of hope dimming as she realized that even in this moment of truth, Michael was swayed by Isabella's manipulation. I was only trying to defend our guests, Clara replied quietly, her resolve faltering under the weight of their scrutiny. As the gala continued around them, Clara felt the walls closing in. She had hoped this moment would spark change, but instead it left her feeling more isolated than ever, trapped in a world where her worth was continuously called into question. Clara stood in the dim light of her small, cluttered room within the mansion, her heart heavy as she meticulously folded her modest clothes. Each piece of fabric felt like a weight on her chest, a reminder of the life she once had and the son she had lost. The walls around her echoed with memories, shadows of laughter and warmth that seemed a lifetime away. She was resolute. It was time to leave this place behind, to step out from the shadows of her son's extravagant life and finally reclaim her own. As she packed the last of her belongings, a wave of nostalgia washed over her, mingling with a sharp pang of heartbreak. She glanced at the photograph of her and Michael from years ago, their faces illuminated by the sun, carefree and full of hope. "Oh, Michael," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "If only you knew." Tears threatened to spill, but she blinked them away, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. She couldn't reveal her identity now, not after all the pain and distance. She would leave quietly, letting him continue his life, free from the burdens of their shared past. Just as she finished, the sound of voices drifted down the hallway, drawing her attention. It was Michael and Isabella, their laughter echoing against the opulent walls. Clara's heart sank as she heard Isabella's voice, sharp and condescending. "I just can't stand the way they carry themselves, Michael," Isabella said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Those people think they deserve respect just because they have a sob story. I mean, look at our staff. They should be grateful for the jobs we give them." Clara's breath caught in her throat. The words pierced her like a knife, each syllable a reminder of the deep chasm that had formed between her and her son. She had hoped against hope that maybe he would have developed a sense of compassion, a flicker of empathy. But here he was, laughing with his wife, oblivious to the truth that lay beneath her polished exterior. "Isn't that the truth?" Michael replied, his voice light, but Clara could hear an underlying uncertainty. "But you know how it is. People like Clara—" He hesitated, and Clara's heart skipped a beat. "They're just happy to have a roof over their heads. It's not our job to coddle them." Clara felt her chest tighten with grief. She had thought that Michael might be different, that he might have inherited some of her compassion. She turned away from the door, wishing she could erase the past, wishing her son had not been molded by Isabella's disdain. The realization hit her hard. He had become someone she hardly recognized. With a heavy heart, Clara stepped toward the front door, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. Just as she was about to turn it, the door swung open, and there stood Michael. Their eyes locked, and for a moment the world around them faded. Clara felt the weight of years pressing down on her, the unspoken words swirling between them like a storm. "Clara." Michael's voice was a mix of confusion and surprise. "What are you doing here?" Clara hesitated, the truth teetering on the edge of her lips. She longed to throw her arms around him, to tell him everything. The love that had never faded, the torment of being apart, the pain of watching him from a distance. But she couldn't risk shattering the fragile existence he had built. I was just about to leave," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Leave? Why?" His brow furrowed with concern, genuine and piercing, as if he could sense the turmoil within her. Clara could see the warmth and love in his eyes, yet it was clouded by ignorance of who she truly was. "I just need to go," she said, her voice faltering. "It's for the best." "Clara, please don't. You don't have to go. I can help you." Before he could finish, Isabella's voice rang through the hallway, cutting through the moment like glass. "Michael, where are you? I need you." Clara felt panic rise in her throat. She could not allow Isabella to see this moment, to witness the connection that still existed between mother and son. "I really must go," she insisted, stepping back. "Wait!" Michael reached out, but Clara was already retreating, desperate to escape the emotional whirlwind. She turned, her heart heavy with the weight of unspoken truths, as she slipped out of the mansion, leaving behind the life she had known and the son she so deeply loved. The morning sun filtered through the grand windows of the mansion, casting delicate patterns of light on the polished marble floor. Clara stood in the kitchen, her hands submerged in soapy water, scrubbing a pot that had seen better days. The clinking of utensils echoed through the vast space, a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped her heart. She had made the decision to stay, hoping for a moment when she could finally reveal her identity to Michael. Yet, with each passing hour, Isabella's arrogance loomed larger, suffocating her resolve. As Clara worked, she could hear Isabella's voice drifting from the living room, where she was hosting a brunch for her wealthy friends. "It's simply unacceptable how some people just don't know their place," Isabella said, her voice dripping with disdain. Clara paused, her heart aching as she imagined her son, blissfully unaware of the contempt in his wife's words. "Is it true that the new designer is going to showcase his collection at the gala next month?" one of the guests asked, her voice filled with excitement. "Of course," Isabella replied, dismissively waving her hand. "It's all about connections, darling. Some people just don't have the right ones." Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She was part of the invisible world that Isabella so openly belittled. Despite the pain, she steeled herself, determined to find the right moment to speak to Michael. Perhaps today would be the day. Later, as the brunch guests departed, Michael entered the kitchen, his brow furrowed in thought. Clara's heart raced at the sight of him. He looked so much like the boy she once knew, innocent, hopeful, unaware of the turmoil that surrounded him. "Clara, have you seen the letter that was on my desk?" he asked, his voice breaking through her reverie. Clara's hands stilled at the mention of the letter. It was a piece she had written years ago, expressing her love and regrets as a mother. She had never intended for him to find it. I haven't seen it, sir," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. Michael's gaze lingered on her, a mixture of concern and curiosity etched on his face. "You seem different lately. Is everything all right?" he inquired, his eyes searching hers for answers. Clara felt a surge of emotion but held it back. "I'm just adjusting to the changes in the household," she said softly, avoiding his gaze as she resumed her task. Before she could retreat further into her thoughts, Isabella strode into the kitchen, her presence commanding and dismissive. "Michael, darling, I need you to help me with something in the living room," she said, her tone laced with impatience. "Just a moment, Isabella," he replied, still looking at Clara. "I was talking to Clara." Isabella rolled her eyes, a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Come on, Michael. We have important matters to discuss. You can talk to the help later." Michael's expression darkened at her words. "Isabella, this isn't just about the help. Clara has been working hard, and you need to show her some respect," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. Isabella crossed her arms, her posture defiant. "Respect? Michael, she's a housekeeper, not one of my friends. Why should I treat her like she's on the same level as us?" The tension in the kitchen thickened, Clara's heart racing as she watched the argument unfold. This was the moment she had been waiting for, yet fear held her back. Would revealing her identity change anything? Would it even matter? "Why are you so cruel to her?" Michael pressed, his voice rising with intensity. "She deserves kindness, just like anyone else." "Kindness?" Isabella scoffed. "You think kindness is deserved by everyone? Some people are simply beneath us, Michael. You need to understand that." Clara felt the weight of her son's words, the flicker of hope igniting within her. She wanted to stand up, to say something, but the fear of the unknown kept her silent. Instead, she focused on the dishes, her hands trembling as she scrubbed the plates, wishing for the courage to reveal the truth. As the argument continued, Clara felt the walls of the mansion closing in on her, a prison of wealth and arrogance. She realized that her son was beginning to see through Isabella's facade, and perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a chance for clarity and reconciliation. The journey to that moment, however, would require more than just courage. It needed a reckoning, a confrontation that would change everything. In the opulent mansion, the air was thick with tension as Clara stood in the lavishly decorated living room, her heart racing. The chandelier above sparkled as if reflecting the turmoil within her. She had reached a breaking point, and the tears that brimmed in her eyes were a testament to the years of pain she had silently endured. Today she would confront Isabella, the woman who had made her life a living hell, but also the woman who had unwittingly kept her from her son. "Isabella!" Clara's voice trembled as she called out, the weight of her emotions pushing her forward. The room was empty, yet she felt the presence of all the moments of humiliation, disdain, and arrogance that Isabella had thrown her way. When Isabella finally appeared, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the marble as she sauntered in, Clara felt a surge of fear and determination. "What is it now, Clara? I don't have all day," Isabella replied, her tone dripping with condescension. She'd been accustomed to wielding her power over Clara like a weapon, and today would be no different if Clara allowed it. With a deep breath, Clara steadied herself. "I need to talk to you about who I really am." The words spilled out, heavy and raw, and for a moment Isabella paused. Confusion flickered briefly across her face, but it was quickly replaced by the familiar sneer. "Who you are? You're the help. Just a housekeeper, nothing more," Isabella retorted, her voice laced with mockery. "What could you possibly have to say that would matter?" Clara's heart pounded in her chest, but there was no turning back. "I am your husband's mother, Isabella!" The truth hung in the air like a thunderclap, reverberating against the walls of the grand room. Silence enveloped them, thick and suffocating as Isabella's expression morphed from disbelief to sheer horror. "What did you just say?" Isabella's voice was barely a whisper, her bravado stripped away. Clara took a step closer, her tears now cascading down her cheeks. "I am Michael's mother. I left you all those years ago, but I've returned to understand the man he has become and the woman who claims to love him." The revelation hung in the air, heavy and electric. Isabella staggered back, grappling with the truth that shattered her illusions of superiority. In the distance, Michael, who had just returned from a meeting, walked into this charged atmosphere, the tension palpable. He froze in the doorway, sensing that something monumental had just occurred. His eyes flicked between Clara and Isabella, confusion and concern etched on his face. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice steady but uncertain. Clara turned to him, her heart aching at the sight of her son, the man she had longed to embrace, yet kept at arm's length for so many years. "Michael, Clara began, but Isabella interrupted, her voice rising in panic. "This is absurd. She's lying. You cannot believe her." "Is she?" Michael's gaze was piercing, and for the first time he looked at Isabella not as a devoted husband, but as a man questioning the foundations of his life. "Clara, is it true?" "Yes," she replied, her voice breaking. "I am your mother. I took this job to understand who Isabella really is and to see how you've been treated." The weight of her confession hung heavily between them, and Michael's face contorted with disbelief and betrayal. Isabella, now cornered, felt the walls of her world crumbling. "No, you can't be serious. She's just a servant, Michael. She's trying to ruin us." Her desperate plea rang hollow, the truth exposing her cruelty. Michael stepped closer to Clara, feeling the warmth of her presence, the familiarity he had craved yet never understood. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" His voice was a mixture of anger and heartbreak, and Clara felt the ache of their lost years cut deep. "I was afraid, Michael. Afraid you wouldn't accept me after everything," she confessed, her heart open and bare. "But I never wanted this for you. I wanted you to have a life filled with love, not the torment I see you endure." In that moment, a flicker of understanding ignited in Michael's eyes. He turned to Isabella, his voice steady. "You need to understand the pain you've caused, not just to Clara, but to me as well. This arrogance, this disdain for people, it needs to end." Isabella, her facade shattered, felt a deep sense of shame wash over her. The walls she had built around her heart began to crumble as she faced the weight of her actions. I didn't know," she stammered, her bravado fading into vulnerability. "I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me," Michael echoed, incredulous, "by treating my mother like she was worthless?" Clara stepped forward, her heart swelling with hope. "We can heal, Michael. We can find a way to reconcile. But it starts with honesty and humility." With tears streaming down her face, Isabella took a deep breath, the gravity of the moment settling in. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I was wrong. I've treated you both horribly, and I thought it was power, but it was just fear." The three of them stood there, the tension easing as a new understanding began to form. In that moment of reckoning, Clara stepped forward, embracing Michael, who held her tightly, tears of relief and love flowing freely. Isabella, feeling the warmth of their bond, took a hesitant step forward, her heart yearning for connection. "Can we start over?" Isabella asked, her voice trembling with sincerity. Clara looked into her eyes, and in that moment she saw a flicker of hope, a glimmer of change. "Let's try," Clara replied softly, her heart open to the possibility of redemption. Together they would navigate the path toward healing, where love could flourish anew and the scars of the past could finally begin to mend.